My name is Jocelyn, and this is my freedom story. So my favorite thing about freedom would be the community. When I first came to Freedom, everyone welcomed me with open arms, and you just feel the love when you first walk on campus. And then as you get ingrained into the community at Freedom, you realize that it's bigger than just a church. You really are a family. So a little bit about me. My name is Jocelyn Elmore. I am the Director of Connections here at Freedom Church. I'm originally from Maryland, a small town called Princess Anne. Most of you probably don't know where that is or what that is. I grew up in church. I went to St. James United Methodist Church my whole life, up until I went to college. But my first encounter with God was when I was probably around maybe 5 years old. My family and I were at Disney, and we were at a resort, and I decided that, well, first, my mom took us to the pool. My sister, who's 5 years older than me, so she probably was around 10 at the time, and my little cousin, she probably was 4, all went out to go swimming, and they had a kiddie pool. My mom took us to the kiddie pool, and it was extremely cold in the kiddie pool. And I was like, well, I can't swim. You know, the kiddie pool is you just sit and splash and just run. But I wanted to actually swim. So I was like, Mom, can we go to the big pool? And she was like, no. And then I kept begging her and begging her. She was like, fine, but you can only sit on the step. So she took us over to sit on the steps. And it's my little cousin and I sitting on the steps, and my sister's in the water doing her little, I'll insert the meme so you can see it. She's on her little fake swim because she didn't know how to swim at the time. So I'm like, this is just as bad as the kiddie pool. I can't even feel the water because she had us on the top step. So I'm like, can I go down to the next step? And she was like, fine, just one more step. So I go down to the next step. Then it wasn't enough for me. So I go down one more step, and then I'm like, oh, that's still not enough. So I look down, I'm holding on to the rail to go into the pool, and I look down in the water and I see another step. But I didn't know what I know now, that when you look into water, your perception isn't clear because the water, it looks closer, the step looked closer than it actually was. So I went in to step down on the step, and I was in the water and going under. So I just remember drowning and just remember being under the water and just seeing this bright white light. And then I just heard a voice, a strong commanded voice that told me, Jocelyn, paddle like a dog. And I'm like, nobody is around me in this water. Who's talking to me? And I just ignored it because I'm like, clearly I'm drowning and I feel like I'm gonna die. And the voice just kept getting stronger and stronger. The light was bright. And that was God telling me to paddle like a dog. So I paddled like a dog until I could get above air, and my mom was able to come and grab me. And I remember at that young age that God came and he saved me. And from then, I just knew that he had big plans for me because he didn't have to do what he did, and he did. And he came to me directly and showed his face to me, showed his power, showed his grace. So ever since then, that really sparked my faith and my belief, and it really has me to where I am now. So growing up, I was involved in church, very active in church. We praised, danced, sang on the choir, went to conferences and concerts. Ty Tribbett would come down to University of Maryland Eastern Shore, go Hawks. So he would come, we would just go to a lot of things, and we had a great time in church as a child and as a youth. But when I went to college, I didn't really go to a church, a local church. I went to a predominantly white institution, a small college, liberal arts college in Chestertown, Maryland. So there was a church that was recommended, but I didn't have a car, so I would have to walk. So a whole bunch of excuses, right? So I didn't really go to college, church in college, but I still have faith. Many of my friends would come talk to me about God. We would pray. I was always that friend growing up throughout all of my life, really, the one that people would come to for advice or to give people encouraging words. So in college, I won't share all the details. This will be a long, long story, but I've had some great memories and then some not too fond. One of the best times I studied abroad in Spain, and I was able to see God from a different lens there. My host family was Catholic, so I went to Catholic church with them and learning how to praise God in Spanish. That was amazing. But then when I came home my senior year, before the pandemic happened, I graduated in 2020, but before that, my school was going through a lot of racial differences, and a lot of issues were going on in my college. So that whole time, I'm just asking God, like, what is going on? Like, this is just so much. I remember so many times people would come. I was the president of the Black Student Union. They would come to my dorm or call me and like, hey, this is happening. And I'm like, we just got to pray and then we're going to fight. So I spent most of my entire college year like fighting for being an activist on campus and fighting for social justice and equity. And I just remember I just got so tired, and I was like, you know what? After spring break, I'm done fighting. Like, I'm gonna have fun. I'm gonna party. This is the time when I was still in the world. So I'm gonna party, I'm gonna drink, I'm gonna do all these things. I'm gonna just do me, because I'm just tired of, like, my whole senior year was just giving out and pouring out into so many other people and so many other things that I didn't really take time for myself. So then, as you know, that spring break coming back did not happen. COVID happened, and I was unable to go and finish my college semester on campus, which I think was a blessing in disguise. Who would have known what would have happened, me drinking and doing all crazy things and trying to live a college life for that last half of that semester, what would have happened. But I just remember, like, wow, like, I did all of this work and like nothing. I mean, again, I was active all my life in everything that I did in high school, very active, college, still very active. And I'm just like, Lord, like, I just keep pouring, and then here I am. So I ended up graduating and looking for employment. It was hard because it's COVID. Nobody is hiring. Nobody's leaving their jobs because they want that security. So there weren't really many opportunities, but I ended up managing to get an internship with the government that summer, a Pathways internship, which was really nice. My supervisor was great, a great influence on me, a great mentor during that time, but I could only do it for 4 months because I had already graduated, and it's usually for high school up until you graduate. So I was like, oh, here I'm back at it again. Like, I had something, now I don't have something, so I'm back searching. And this whole time I'm like, Lord, what do you have for me? What are your plans for me? And I couldn't see what he was doing, so I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on. So I applied to, my sister, she had moved to Texas and was working in Texas. She was like, well, why don't you just come move here? And I'm like, girl, I gotta have money. I gotta have money to move here. That's a cross-country trip, which I didn't have any funds to move myself. So I was like, well, what I'll do is I'll apply for jobs in Texas, and I'll apply for jobs in Maryland, and whichever one comes first is what I'll do next. So I kept applying. I was trying to apply to more Texas jobs because I wanted to move. I didn't want to be in Maryland anymore. But no jobs would stick. And then one day my aunt called me and said, hey, I got a job opportunity for you in DC at a school. So I was like, sure, I'll apply and see what comes of it. I applied, got the job, and they wanted me to start right away. So I was like, well, guess I'm moving to DC. There goes Texas. So packed up, found an apartment, did all of that hunt, and moved to DC. Well, not DC. I lived in Silver Spring, but I worked in DC. And I enjoyed my job at first. I enjoyed the city life, because again, I'm a country girl. I enjoyed the city life for a bit, but I just always felt like this missing piece of me, like I wasn't fully happy. And I just was like, I don't know. And the job started getting old. I feel like I was pouring out again, that same feeling of pouring, and just not receiving enough. So I was like, it's time for me to go. So I would apply to a bunch of jobs, I probably applied to over 100, and I just kept hearing no. And I'm like, God, what is this no? Like, why am I keep hearing no, no, no? So trying I remember my mom was encouraging and like, hey, he's got something in store for you. A no isn't a no forever. And I'm just like, it's hard to hear those things when you're in the midst of something. So I remember one day I was like, all right, I'm gonna just give up. Maybe I'm supposed to be here, even though I knew I didn't want to be. But I applied to probably 10 more jobs. And then I remember I was in a good process with 2 jobs. And I ended up getting the offer for both. And I was able to choose which job I wanted to do. Both of them fully remote, because that's what I was looking for, so that I could move to Texas, because I felt like God was calling me to Texas. So I ended up choosing one over the other. My lease was running up, and I was like, oh, time to go. So I packed up my stuff. And right before we were getting ready to leave, I was faced with some pain and heartache because my aunt passed away, literally the weekend before the move. So my sister flew in. We went. Well, before that, let me rewind. That weekend that she passed, I went to church with a friend who went to college with me. We went to church together. She had found this church, and she was like, oh, I think you would really like it. So we go to the church, and I fell in love with it. And I remember the preacher specifically saying, like storms that we go through and all these things. And she was like, somebody's probably going through a storm right now, or you're going to face this storm when you leave these doors. And then when I went outside and we were sitting in the car, that's when I got the call that my aunt had passed away. And I was like, wow, this message was literally sitting for me. But I was like, wow, this church, I really love this church. It's crazy that we would find this church like right in the midst of me getting ready to move to Texas. I'm like, God, what are you doing? Like, what's going on? So my sister flies in, we pack up, go to the funeral. Directly, like right after the funeral, we go back, get the U-Haul, and we are on our way to Texas. And this is in 2022, March of 2022. So we moved me in with my sister, and my cousin's here, a couple people are here, like my family's here, get settled in, having a good time. And remember, like, I've always been having a relationship with God, but I just didn't fully pursue God. But I knew something would be different now. Since that last time at church, I was like, okay, I really want to start intentionally seeking God. So I make cakes. I'm a baker. I have a small baking business called Bake by Jocelyn. And my sister had gotten this group called the Girlfriends of Fort Worth, and she added me in the group as well. So someone had asked for cake pops on there, Christy. And Christy just asked, did anyone know how to make cake pops, or was anyone available to make cake pops for this weekend? And mind you, this was only my second weekend or third weekend in Texas, I believe. And Ashley tagged me in the post, and she ended up picking me to make the cake pops. And at first I was like, I don't want to make them. Like, I'm not fully settled in here. All my baking stuff isn't fully out. And I was like making a whole bunch of excuses. My cousin was here. We went to a margarita crawl, and like, again, I was still in the world. So I was tipsy coming home from the margarita crawl. I was like, I really don't want to make these cake pops. And then God convicted me and was like, you better make these cake pops. So I make the cake pops, and she comes and picks them up the next morning. And I go outside to give her the order, and she's like, yeah, I'm on my way to church. I'm like, oh, really? What church do you go to? Because I'm actually looking for a church. I just moved here, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, Freedom Church, I think you would love it. You should definitely come. You can come right now. And I was like, girl, I'm not dressed, number one. My family's in there. No one's expecting to go to church. So I'll come next week. And she's like, okay, take my number, blah, blah, blah. So I told her we were coming next weekend. I asked her a couple questions about the church. and then told her we were coming next weekend. So Ashley and I ended up going to visit the church, and just Christy's love, like from that moment of meeting her, she made sure that someone met us when we came through the doors. She made sure that she sat close to us. She was running a little late, so she couldn't sit beside us, but she sat behind us. She introduced us to people when we got there, so we could just feel like the love and intentionality when we came as guests. So as soon as we got through the doors, like I just felt like, wow, this is my home. Now, the church that I had visited before I moved from Maryland, Freedom was like almost identical to what the other church was. So I was like, wow, I didn't see it then, but I was like, oh, the Lord was preparing me for where he had me going. So I go in worship. Pastor Rob, is captivating. So I heard the message. I felt like he was talking exactly to me. And I was like, oh, wow, this is my home. I remember leaving out after she introduced us to everybody. Me and Ashley are in the car, and Ashley's like, so what'd you think? I was like, girl, this is my church. I ain't leaving. I don't need to see any other churches. This is my church. And Ashley was like, oh, I loved it too, but I had to come back a couple more times before I decide. And deep down, she knew it was her church too, but she's one of those people that's gotta, see a couple times before. She's just not gonna make emotional decisions. I'm more the emotional one. So I automatically knew that this was my church, so I started going. We went every single week, and we were getting connected. I remember I had, at the previous church, went on the Bible app there, and they were telling us that, they had a partnership with Life Church with the Bible app where you can see live things from the church, so you can get all the scriptures and all of the notes. So I was looking on there to see if Freedom had it, and we didn't have it at the time. So I asked someone, I was like, hey, did you know that you can do this at the church, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, no, let me get you in touch with someone from production. So they went and took me to KJB, and then KJB didn't know. So then he took me to Marcus, and Marcus was like, oh, dope, blah, blah, blah. If you know Marcus, you know how he is. And he was like, oh, that's so cool. But find the information for me and send it to me. So I got in the car, and immediately I looked it up, sent it to him right away. And now I know he told me he was testing me to see like if I was gonna be a person who followed up, or if I was just gonna say things. And if you know me, I follow up. So after that, he set up a meeting with Ashley and I to go to Starbucks to really learn about what we were interested in, what we wanted to do, what our hobbies were. So I told him what I was doing at the time, which I was a project manager, a project manager for a fundraising consulting firm, which had a cross between administration, executive assistant duties, and project management. So practice manager, sorry. So I was doing that, and he was like, oh, I need an admin for the worship creative team. So I started working with Marcus at doing that, and our friendship just developed. We learned so much about each other, and I really helped him get some things in order with the creative team at Freedom. Then we went through Faith Forward. Me and Ash were like, okay, time to become members. So we went through Faith Forward, did the process, and I met with Tasha and learned about my spiritual gifts and like what God really had for me, which is so impactful. Faith Forward really shows you in a way that you may have never seen before. So just to see that was great, and to apply it to my life then. So after that, again, still serving with Marcus, getting active and involved. Then I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to be rebaptized. I was baptized in my youth age at church, but I didn't really know what it meant. So I was like, I'm ready to take that step, because once I go on this water, this is going to be a new Jocelyn. And I meant it. So I got baptized in July. I told Ashley, I was like, I'm getting baptized. I don't know if you want to do it, because she was like, I do want to do it, but I don't know if I want to wait till the September date or if I want to do it in July. I was like, well, I'm doing it in July. So we both got baptized, and I just remember right before that, I went to Florida with my friend, my best friend, and I was like, oh, this is my last hurrah of being in these streets before I get baptized. So had fun out there. Again, I was still a little worldly, drinking, going to parties, doing all that. But then when I got in that water and I got dipped in that water, I was like, I knew when I came out, I was going to walk different and my life would look different. So after that, again, I'm still serving, but life groups come up. And this was going to be my first semester of life groups. So I was looking through the life groups and I remember seeing Ertasha's name and I was like, I'm definitely getting in her life group because I looked up to Ertasha, just watching her. She was one of the people that Christy introduced us to as well. It was Ertasha, Marcus, and Kat. And then of course we met Pastor. But I remember seeing Ertasha's name and I was like, I want her to mentor me and I want to get and pick her brain because I could just see her intelligence and just see how she loved God and how God was using her. So I'm going to join her group, whatever it is. I didn't even look at the whole description. I just saw her name and I joined the group. Well, come to find out, it was about the chosen. So I ended up going and it ended up just being Ertasha, me, and Josh. And we had a great semester. We just learned so much. We had so many fruitful conversations. And really what happened then is like a pivotal moment of like where I am now as well in my life. So I remember us going through the semester and my job was doing layoffs. And they kept saying, oh no, it won't be any of you guys. And I was just like, I feel like God placed on my heart that I knew it was going to be me. So I told them, I was like, my job's doing layoffs. They said we should be fine, but I really feel like I'm going to be included in the next one. And they, we prayed and they were like, okay, let's start looking, let's start preparing. So I'm preparing my mind and my heart. But I was not prepared financially. I was probably 23 at the time. So I was not mature with finances and if I knew what I do now. So I didn't have any savings saved up. So I was just, spending, having fun. And then I remember getting the call one day. I usually make all of the appointments and meetings for my bosses. And then I got a meeting with my bosses and I'm like, how is this so? Like, how y'all make a meeting for me? I should have made this meeting. So I get to the meeting and I already knew. I'm like, okay, clearly this is what's going to happen. So they let me know I was laid off. And, I cried because of the emotion. Like, I'm like, Lord, what am I going to do? But then I just remembered, like, God has me, like, just learning what I learned from life group. She taught us the SOAP method and how to study the Bible. So I just started getting in love with reading the Bible and really studying God's word. So I just remember, like, after I cried to my sister, I went, read the Bible, and I just felt better. But I knew it was going to be hard because I wasn't prepared. So after that, I just kept doing what God was calling me to do. I was being Marcus's admin. And I was just like, you know what, now's the time to up and do my business. So I was putting in a lot of work with creative things and communications things with my business, recording on TikTok and editing content, making content. And I just had got this strong desire to do so. And I'm like, why? But as the director of communications was under me, so makes sense, right? Didn't know that then. So I just start doing my business, serving, and then I shared with Marcus, of course, that I got laid off. We prayed, we talked about it. He tried to help me to find other employment, and then he ended up sharing it with Pastor and Kat ended up asking me would I be interested in being pastor's assistant, and I was like, yeah, of course. So I applied and ended up getting a job. So I started working with Pastor part-time, and I was still being Marcus's admin part-time, and then still running my business. And I did that from January of 2023. And as Pastor and I were working together and getting to know each other, he realized, and he'll share this part in his, but he realized that there was something more in me than just being his assistant. And I just felt like, I'm just being me. I'm coming, bringing ideas and just sharing what I think to our staff meetings. And then one day he tells me, he shares that with me, and I'm like, well, I don't know what it is, Pastor, but I feel the same way. I don't know what it is, where I'm supposed to be at. So we just keep doing the same thing, right? And I'm stressing a little bit because I'm making part-time pay, which is better than nothing. But I'm like, I still got full-time bills. So I'm like, Lord, what do you have for me? I'm applying for these jobs. And then every time I would apply for jobs, the Lord would say, no, wait, do your business. Wait, don't do that. So, but the humanity in me is like, oh, I need to provide for myself. I had this lack of trust in God to be the sole provider for me. So I'm like, okay, I have to find a job myself. But every time I would, he would be like, no. Like, I would hear him loudly and clearly. He's like, no. So I was like, all right, Lord, you know something I don't. So what we gonna do? So I'm just still doing the same things, right? And then one day, Pastor's like, hey, can you write me a communications plan for something? I was like, communications plan, like, where's this coming from? So I was like, sure. But I went to school for business management because I want to own restaurants, own my own business, not for marketing. I took marketing classes, but I did not go to school for that. So I'm like, communications plan, what? I feel like I am a good communicator, but a plan, okay. So I did a plan. And then he was like, yes. So what do you think about being our communications director here at Freedom? And I was like, okay. I'm like, all right, Lord. So I prayed about it, and I was like, all right, this is what we have. A part of me was still scared because, again, this was not in like my field house of what I thought I knew how to do. But really, as I look back on my life, I did communications in high school, I did it in college, and then I've always been in the communications field, but I just never directly pursued it. So I took the job, started as the director of communications at Freedom, and we just flourished. I just started getting my hands into it and just started doing a lot. It grew, we're growing, and then Pastor was like, Jocelyn, is something else. Like, it's deeper, it's more, there's something else than just communications. So then I was offered to be Director of Connections, which oversees the experience team, Faith Forward, Next Steps, and Communications. So I just started that earlier this year, and it's just been an amazing journey. I mean, just to see how God has literally been so intentional in my life and how he's literally laid every single thing, every single step, every single path. He's laid it in front of me. And sometimes you can't see it because we're blinded. Our perception and our views are clouded. But as you really sit and be still and study his word and spend time with him, you can really see how he's moving. And I just have had this beauty of being able to see how he's truly orchestrated every step in every area of my life and to where I am now. And I'm just so grateful, one, for God for even saving me that day in that water, but two, for bringing me to Texas. I knew he was calling me here. Three, for Pastor for believing in me. And then four, for me trusting God, because if it had not been for me willing to trust and deny myself and be willing to follow him, then I don't think I would be right where I am today. And I'm so grateful because there's no better place than Freedom Church, in my opinion. And I'm just loving what God is doing here, and I'm so excited for what he is to do. So that's my freedom story. That's how I got to Freedom Story. That's how I got to Freedom. That's where I'm at. And I just can't wait to see what he's getting ready to do in the future.